We are going to go through the speaker order that was in the press release, but just generally speaking, I know you saw it in the email that I sent out earlier, but we will have time for questions after everyone gives their remarks. What we're going to be doing is asking you to raise your hand, and then we'll go ahead and unmute you. You can ask your question. If you'd like, please address it to whoever you'd like to answer the question. But if other folks want to jump in on a question, we're all on Zoom. We can all answer questions. It'll be fun and fine. But yeah, without further ado, God, sorry, I am coughing up a storm here. We can get going here. Sorry, I need to find the right press release, everyone. So just to start, I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Attar Hasbulla is the Executive Director of the ACLU of Nevada. Oh my God. Attar, thanks so much.
I appreciate it, Jacob. And if you would have gotten the pronunciation wrong at that moment, we would have probably just ended the Zoom call right then and there. But thanks, folks, for being on with us, and thanks to the coalition for all the work that everybody is doing right now. We won't be extensive. We did want to make sure that at the ACLU we gave an opportunity to answer any potential technical questions that might arise. I know there's a series of them, but we are very opposed to this ballot initiative, specifically for a couple reasons. Stringent voter ID requirements nationwide have created a greater risk of voter suppression than they have of potentially addressing voter fraud, which is non-existent. In fact, the Brennan Center had completed a report 2 years ago in which they cited the fact that voter impersonation is less likely to occur than being struck by lightning. That is significant overall, because the efforts to introduce voter ID measures, simply put, are political in nature and not rooted in fact. If we were to start to create policy for every conspiracy theory, every falsehood that ends up existing, it would simply undermine democracy and undermine what everything that we want to happen, including the protection of civil liberties, looks like. Specifically, adding this into the Constitution would be disastrous for a number of reasons. There are challenges with people accessing IDs, and the people that are most distant away from being able to obtain easy access to an ID. And I know many of us take it for granted because a lot of us have our IDs, but for those that face challenges in getting those IDs, whether it's somebody with a disability, whether it's somebody who's unhoused, whether it's somebody who's 18 years old that's on their own for the first time and is down to their last $35 and is surviving day to day, those individuals should all have the ability to participate in an election. And an initiative to undercut that effort, rooted in falsehoods, lies, and deceit, shouldn't see the light of day. And so we're grateful to be a part of this coalition to push back against that. Jacob?
Thanks so much. And next up, we're going to go to Carrie Dermick, who's the Nevada State Director at All Voting is Local Action.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me today. So All Voting is Local Action is also very opposed to Question 7. We feel that Question 7 is trying to solve a problem that actually does not exist in our state or even the country. Here in Nevada, we have less than 1% of voter fraud, and our election system has also has an A+ rating as well too. And so I think going off of also what Attar had said, in one study we saw billions of votes be studied, and there's only 31 cases of voter impersonation across the country, and we just don't think that spending millions of dollars not only to implement this on voter education, on training, on staff is a good reason to eradicate essentially no voter fraud in our state. And then we already have an excellent election system. Like, we have ID requirements during the registration process and for first-time voters. And we also have a very successful signature match program across the state. And then we also feel that Question 7 is going to overcomplicate our vote-by-mail system. If this is to pass, voters would be required to add their Nevada ID number or the last four of their Social Security numbers. And it would also require them to continue to sign their vote-by-mail ballot envelope as well too. And we feel like this new measure will cause the vote-by-mail curing process to explode, and we feel this is like extremely unfair to Nevada voters. And lastly, we see this measure as a modern day poll tax. my own organization put out a cost of voter suppression report, and what we found is that attaining an ID can actually cost a voter up to $100 through childcare costs, transportation costs, and ID costs. And really, the state would have to spend millions of dollars to avoid a modern day poll tax. But yeah, those are all the reasons that All Voting is Local Action is opposed. And thanks so much. And I'll kick it back over to Jacob.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Now we're going to go to Danielle Fitzgerald, the Deputy Organizing Director at the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. Danielle.
Thank you for having me. We're here to say no to question 7. Plan believes our democracy works best when everyone has a say, not just corporations. For 30 years, we have worked to make the legislative process more accessible to working class Nevadans. Alongside our many partners, we have advocated to expand access to the ballot box so that the folks who keep our economy running and are busy with the challenges of supporting their families can also have a say in the future of their neighborhoods, cities, state, and country. We fought to give a voice to traditionally disenfranchised communities, from expanding tribal voting to the restoration of voting rights for formerly incarcerated Nevadans. Thanks to our collective efforts, we have an electoral system that meets the needs of our community, whether they are voting early, and by mail, in person on election day. Voter ID laws like the one that the Question 7 ballot initiative wants to implement are detrimental to our efforts to increase voter participation. Strict voter ID laws disproportionately disenfranchise communities of colors, low-income voters, and those with limited access to necessary documentation, further marginalizing their voices in our democracy. Adding additional barriers to voting that are based on false claims of voter fraud will only keep working class and low-income Nevadans from using their voice at the ballot box. In Nevada, over half of eligible voters, especially women, do not get paid time off to vote, with 75% of unregistered voters facing this challenge. Our goal as a state and country needs to be increase voter participation and engagement, not create more barriers. Eligible voters should be able to cast their ballot without costly added requirements that do very little to increase election integrity. There shouldn't be any financial barriers to using your voice. Nevadans deserve an accessible democracy where everyone's voice is heard. No to question 7. And back to you, Jacob.
Thank you. And finally, we're going to kick it to Shelby Swartz, who's the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress and the Secretary of the Nevada Voter Freedom Alliance. Shelby.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Question 7 is political theater dressed up as policy. Decades of evidence in dozens of other states has taught us that voter ID laws, no matter how strict, do not make our elections safer. The data shows us that what voter ID laws actually do is restrict access, disproportionately disenfranchising voters of color, young voters, and voters with disability, and create a fundamentally undemocratic barrier to the constitutional right to vote. What these laws actually do is introduce chaos and uncertainty into election processes that already work. At the cost of millions of dollars to be paid in perpetuity by the taxpayers, Question 7 would put the burden of voter verification on individual election workers, not the broader election administration system. And Question 7 would undermine the state's universal vote-by-mail system. In Texas, a strict voter ID law implemented in 2021 led to skyrocketing mail ballot rejection rates in the 2022 midterms. A study from the Brennan Center for Justice found that those rejections disproportionately affected voters of color. In Nevada, we know who prefers to vote by mail, and so do the people behind Question 7. This has always been about deciding who gets to vote and how, and the Yes on 7 campaign should not get the benefit of the doubt. They say that this is about restoring faith in our elections, but that's rich when Question 7 is endorsed by Donald Trump, maybe the most singular force aimed at undermining faith in American elections this century. Nevadans deserve better, and the voters who know the truth about voter ID Nevadans need to know the truth about voter ID before they head to the polls. We urge Nevadans to vote no on Question 7. Thank you. Back to you, Jacob.
Thank you. And with that, we are open for questions. So if you've got a question, go ahead and raise your hand or drop it in the chat, and I can go ahead and unmute you. Going once, going twice. Just wanted to check again. If anyone's got any questions, now's the time. Oh, sorry. Oh, I forgot about the time it takes to type. That is my bad. Well, Bert, if you prefer, I can just unmute you right now if that works.
Hey, hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Oh, cool. I wasn't sure my microphone will work with this setup, so I was trying to type things out in a clunky way. Thank you for your patience and for hanging out. I know that here in Washoe County, at least, we saw the Registrar of Voters Office recently send out a signature update cards to voters, and this as part of that update, it required you to include the last four of your social security number as well as an updated signature. And so I'm kind of curious if anyone has any thoughts on what the differences are between something like that and what question 7 would implement in the state.
Is there anyone in particular you want to answer that, or anyone want to hop on that first?
I'm open to whoever wants to take that one on. Thank you.
I mean, I'm happy to start. I mean, I would say that that mailer, I think the first is it was extremely optional, and if you want to be a vote by mail, if you want to vote by mail, that's not necessarily optional, and you would be required to have to do those things. So I think that's definitely one of the differences. And I also, that mailer was not affecting a person's right to vote, and we feel strongly that question 7 will do that.
Yeah, I'll also add on, Bert, that the two distinctions I think that end up existing are, first, the permanency associated between someone administratively doing something one time and then enshrining something into the state constitution so it can never be undone. And moving forward, this will be a scenario that happens for every single election when it's not actually rooted in anything administrative or attempting to address any types of issues that they've had. Now, the mail-in system in Nevada is still relatively new. It's not an ancient system. Certainly, we've had absentee ballots and things like that that were submitted before, but the ability to do that is new. So they've managed to work through those kinks and to protect integrity and an accuracy in the way that they've done it. But adding something to the state constitution, which is only one prong of the question, again, it is a different route to take. The other thing that's associated with it that I think we mentioned is that we recognize that the question was drafted in a way to make this seem like it's not a threat to democracy or not a threat that will lead to voter suppression. But in reality, when you've now created even a two-tiered system for standards with respect to this distinction between casting a vote by mail and voting in person, you start to run into greater challenges. Now, what happens if someone during one election enters or writes a digit that's not as clearly discernible? You're going to run into additional curing issues permanently. And right now, with the signature verification item, they've done that to make sure that that layer of verification and accuracy that they have with respect to a signature is done so that they can make sure they're not running into a cure issue right after the election. Instead, what this would do is lead to curing issues that haven't yet occurred by introducing new variables and potentially leading to the disqualification of certain ballots. And we've seen how many thousands of ballots have been tossed during the pendency of the last few years because of cure-related issues.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Any additional questions? Just want to leave the floor open in case. If not, then I think I'll just put one last chance just in case. But if we're all good, going once, going twice, put it in chat or forever hold your peace. Okay, well, I'm going to take that as a no. So I appreciate everyone taking the time today for being here. Thanks so much. If you have any additional questions, please direct them to either me or Amber. We followed up over email. But other than that, thanks so much for joining this press conference from Nevada Voter Freedom Alliance.